I am calling to order our February 13, 2024 CSD Board of Directors meeting at, what time is it? Alright. Does anybody have any? Oh, we have to pledge.
Would you like to actually get the flag?
Sorry.
I would. Sorry.
You hand out?
Nah.
His delay was not my fault.
I did, I got my IRS, so if I try to e-file. Yeah, I know.
She likes the space between them.
They just go to the shop on that.
Yeah, but it's just so far.
Yeah, well, it's already tried. Honey, you need to sit there. That way. Give me time. You want to come over. Great.
I'm waiting for the guy.
Yeah.
But it's just. Yeah.
Alright, I'll try it.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, now the agenda. Does anyone have any changes? Okay. Then I say we adopt the agenda as is that what I'm supposed to say?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Consent calendar. Any questions or motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
No, I was just curious on the bills paid, how many more are going to Westward Builders?
Well, there was another one in January. They typically bill once a month, so there was another
Okay.
bill of relatively the same size.
That-
You know what? I don't think they've actually billed us in February yet for January, to be honest with you. Because, I'm sorry, I was getting confused with the P&L, that was through 12/31. So the majority of theirs is kind of built out. We hold a 5% retention until punch list is completed, but they're still looking at completion of project by end of this month,
Okay.
which is in here, so that'll be wrapping up soon
All right.
enough. Their total contract's a little over 6.
Okay. Public comment? Or consent calendar?
Not on the consent calendar.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Public comment.
Sure. So as you know, I've been minimizing my time here. And isn't it nice to have timer here when I'm the only member of the public that shows up to communicate with you? I got some bad news over the weekend. A friend of mine died.
Sorry to hear that.
She, well, it's fine. She found out, she's a woman younger than some of you. She found out in December that she had stage 4 colon cancer, and she passed away rather quickly. She was devoted to her community, and just got me thinking, you know, all of us leave this earth at some time, and including each one of you, of course. And if you got such news, how would you spend your last days? Of course, you'd want to tie up your personal business, communicate with people that you know, but you would also have plenty of time to think and ponder life. And where would you want to do that? Probably outdoors, right? So, and I've seen this time and time again because I walk through the park every day. You see elderly people walking through the dog leg of the park because it's flat, it's accessible, it's also remote. And there's not a damn place for them to sit down. What the hell are you guys doing? What the hell are you doing? These are the people of the community that you have ignored. You are ignoring the seniors, you're ignoring the firms, you're ignoring just people who want to enjoy the park. You've raised taxes, you built that stupid project out there, wasted tons of money, you've raised our taxes, and what have you done for the people? The real people. Are you reaching out? Are you doing your job? I ask this every month, hoping for a new result. This is an insulated board. It seems to me that you feel that the extent of your responsibilities is just to improve whatever the staff wants. And I see no initiative to actually do net improvements and reach out and build the community stronger. And I know each one of you are good people, and I wish you would make that effort. And I wish we could get the drunks out of the park on Friday nights. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Any other public comments? District matters.
All right, item E1. I put together, and you guys, please excuse my voice, I seem to have gotten myself a little bit of cold here, so. Put together a P&L sheet for you that goes through December 31st, second quarter, so the first 6 months of the year. Gave you a detailed staff report as well as some variance notes on the final page that are in there. Just a couple things that I would add. As mentioned, if you, in the third paragraph here, we are trending slightly ahead of what we budgeted in terms of overall ad valorem property taxes. Right now, I'm anticipating probably a little, somewhere close to about $100,000 more just in the current secured than what we budgeted. The other thing that I would point out is actually just yesterday we got our second quarter interest installment. So if you kind of go down a little ways and you see interest, county pooled investment, that's at 57. Q2 netted another 60. So we're pretty well ahead of budget on that one as well, because we're up to about 117 on something that only budgeted 5,000 for. So we are doing well.
Wait, say that again?
We have 117,000 in interest so far.
And we budgeted for what?
5.
Okay, that's what I thought you said.
Yeah. Well, because historically it took a massive nosedive a couple of years ago where we budgeted quite a bit more and wound up with quite a bit less. So seeing as how we have no control over the county's
I think 5
investment
is a great
scheme.
number to start at.
It's one of those better be safe. I'd rather outperform than underperform. So, you know, if you add the 60,000 to the number that I gave you in the fourth paragraph there, compared to this same point in time last year, we're about 330,000 ahead of where we were just in terms of total unrestricted cash balance goes. Again, I gotta stress that is a cash flow statement that really doesn't look at much other than timing of when cash comes in or timing of when expenses are paid. But it is a positive trend and it's stayed that way time and time again. You know, you remember the audit that you just saw last month showed last fiscal year, I want to say we were somewhere around 900,000 in revenue over expense total. So that was always good and we've been trending in that way. Q3, we will certainly start to see a lot more revenue come in. That's when the rec programs open up. Just in January, we got the first half, 50% installment for the CSA 13 contract. That's a little over $367,000. And then we also got the revenue from the agreement with County Fire for Rotary Village and County Farm, and that's a little over $98,500. So all that has already come in January. So from a cash basis and an expenditure basis, nothing here is surprising or shocking or raises alarm. I do want to point out that I did make a mention in there that this does not account for, the P&L statement does not account for what we've been spending on the capital project for the creek repair, which through 12/31 was about $345,000, but that does account for the cash balance and the balance sheet information I gave you here. So that money is baked into that total. And I'm still hoping we get reimbursement on that. I'll give you a bigger update on that project a little bit later in this. But otherwise, that kind of is where we're at. If we have any other questions, I am happy to entertain them at this time.
I like the trend.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, everything moves in the right direction, that's all we can ask for. Exactly.
I don't have any questions, so. I don't either.
Yeah, and then the only other part I would say on this is basically every month now through May, you'll be seeing updated, probably not journaled fully because of timing concerns, but you'll be seeing budget drafts, and so we incorporate the latest wherever we are at in a P&L standpoint into that budget, so you'll kind of be able to see greater trends for the next 3 months in a row.
Awesome. No questions. We can move on to item number 2.
Okay, this one, I definitely give you guys a fairly lengthy staff report for, kind of followed the same format as we've done now for the last couple of years when looking at this topic. If you remember, we actually did this last in July because in June, the board had adopted the pay schedule review of non-represented full-time positions policy, but the policy calls for this process to start every year in February. The timing is good. It's interesting as you go through this the first time at this time of year, in that typically I have more budget information for the following year, but I think where we're at and the proposals that we've put out here will be kind of baked into the budget, assuming that the board is okay and provides that kind of direction. I do want to say this is just a discussion item only at this point in time. There's no formal action to be taken by the board at this time, regardless of what happens with pay schedules. That formal action won't happen until June when you approve. But this will, depending on what direction we receive, work its way into the draft budgets coming, and that'll really kind of, as that starts to come together a little bit more each month as more information is revealed, then we'll know. I do want to say in terms of these, we did go through and were able to get enough of the budget work done for information that we had. So when I talk about fully burdened impact, that actually is applying what we know next year are going to be our pension contribution rates, as well as our unfunded accrued liability contributions. So all of that is up. The only thing here that I had to use current year for that is going to change is our workers' comp rates, which are in large part based on a 3-year average. Knock on wood, but last year we actually had as far as worker comp claims go, lower than average of what we had been doing for the last several years. So I'm anticipating that to actually go down a little bit. But for now, and the purpose of this, I am using our current rates, which are rather high given our experience modification factor. But I do anticipate that to fall, but I won't know until I actually get that information back from our insurance provider, hopefully by next month. Otherwise, as we went through this, just kind of looking at where everybody stands, I certainly want to thank Luke because he put a lot of time into doing a lot of research on this and looking at a lot of the comparable agencies, which are the same that we've used now for the past couple of years. Starting kind of at the park, I think we've done a good job at catching the park maintenance up to some degree. I think if you look at this, and this is true in every position in this district is that we're constantly kind of playing catch up. We're constantly amongst, if not the lowest paid at pretty much every single position that we have, at least from a full-time level. What we are proposing at this point in time is looking at a 6.5% increase for part staff. I tried to really kind of crank on some math of what Luke had provided. And if you look at the comparables for where, I'm sorry, 6%. If you look at the comparables for where we are, we were anywhere from, other agencies were paying anywhere from 18 to 43% greater for essentially the most comparable position that we really have when looking at these. If you look at a 6%, that actually reduces that disparity down to 11 to 35. And then what I really did was try to drill down to, you know, kind of the majority that were in the middle, because you always have your outliers on the bottom or your outliers on the top. Obviously, the county pays significantly higher, yet that is actually really kind of a different job, because being on a county maintenance worker is a much larger position than most municipalities or agencies have. So when you look at that, and you compare it to 4-7, and you look at the 6%, assuming we have no idea what they're gonna be doing for next year, this is just what their current levels are, that actually moves us into the 11 to 12% disparity range out of 4 out of the 7, which I think is definitely starting to get there. It still keeps us below, but I think it moves us in the right direction in a year where, you know, we're obviously spending a lot of money on a lot of things. I am anticipating pension rates have gone up significantly, everything else. So this is conservative, looking at that. And then on the rec and admin side, and kind of going through and looking at everything, I mean, the disparity, especially at a rec director position, is mammoth. I didn't even want to crank the math on it, because if you look at it, it's pretty obvious. But kind of looking at everything else, what we are landing on and proposing right now is a 4.5% pay schedule adjustment for them, which starts to put it in a slightly more competitive landscape. And that is really kind of some of the eyes that I was starting to look through for this, is we're just in an incredibly competitive labor market, and this is a key way to have to stay competitive. I certainly think we have the culture and the work environment part down very well, but at the end of the day, people still need to pay bills and be able to eat, and God forbid, play a little bit too. So this is what we are proposing for right now. If all of that is kind of put together, and I kind of tried to give you just a brief summary here, total impact to what would be next year's budget would be a little over $38,000, fully burdened. So that is not just wages, but also the workers' comp impact, the pension impact, the payroll tax impact, everything that comes along with that. And I do want to also put out there that we are also coming, this year will end the current MOU with the firefighters. So we are going to be re-entering negotiations with them as well, and I'm sure that's going to result in some levels of pay increases, and in the same way, that's been a very challenging position for recruiting. So all of that are things to take in mind as we kind of are able to put the budget together and we get closer, and ideally by the time the April draft budget comes around, which really I try to have 90+% complete by that point in time, I think we'll know if where we're at on this, if this is affordable, and can always be adjusted in either direction. Really, I would be hard pressed to pull it down for any of these positions, but you have to do what you have to do. This is up to the board and how they feel about it. The one thing I would say in terms of affordability is there's the other side of that coin, and sometimes it's hard to afford not to do it. Again, if we run very lean, and if one of these people were to leave for a different position somewhere, it'd be very hard to replace them and get the same quality of work at what these rates are. So these are all things to consider. Again, right now, our only recommendation is just to direct staff to incorporate the proposed pay schedule adjustments into the forthcoming budget drafts, and this will continue to be talked about. With that said, I'm happy to answer any questions, take any feedback, or move in a different direction.
Any questions?
I guess the question that I would have, and I
totally supportive of this. Is I'm just curious, how many of you guys are, if this, I don't even know if I can ask this, but how many of the staff are further along, like let's say step 5 or higher? Is that it seems like it would be the majority.
Almost everyone.
Right. That was my assumption.
Right.
Yeah.
So I did, as I went through, I actually updated, we do have 2 people on the rec side that are gonna be moving from step E to step EE. And
Right.
that happens at the 10th year in their respective
Okay.
role. So they will be moving into that. I have one park person we just hired a couple years ago, so they're still kind of going through the steps. So for those people, they will get a 5% step increase plus whatever.
Okay.
So that is, and this is actually something that Luke and I really looked at and talked about too. So for some of these positions, they're gonna see an additional bump just from the step.
Yeah.
And then also from just an overall, and when we were looking at this, we were really trying to look at this less about who we have and who's in what position, and more of just looking at these as positions.
Right, oh, for sure.
Because this isn't a merit base, this is really just kind of a cost of living,
Right.
competitive marketplace kind of adjustment here. But so there are a little bit, and then we have some people that are at that step E that are gonna be there for a few more years, and then we have everybody else is at step EE, and there's nowhere for them to go.
Right.
Because there's not a step triple E or a
Right.
step F, or,
Big
that's,
shoe.
they basically hit the top of the pay
Yeah.
scale based on longevity.
Right.
Which really is pretty unique to a government world, having those very defined steps. I mean, I worked in private practice my entire life before this job, and I've never seen anything like that. I think it's got its pros and I think it's got its cons
Yeah.
to it. I personally, in my position, much more prefer having a range, which then allows a little bit, not a formal action needed every time you want to kind of go through this and look at things, as long as you're falling within those salary
Right.
ranges, except for when you need to increase the entire range. Does that kind of answer your question?
No, it absolutely does. I was assuming that everybody had was just.
Yeah, and then the one thing too, and it's easy to skip over it, looking at the park side, one of the things Luke and I have been talking about, so several years ago, in fact, right before I got here, so in 2014, they reduced the park by 40%. And in doing that, they eliminated the park director position, which was, I was very curious, and I actually remember sitting in my interview saying, I'm gonna be very curious to see how that actually plays out over the next several years. All of those responsibilities have kind of fallen on the rec director, who is technically the rec and park director. It's a lot to take on. So Luke and I have been talking a lot about looking at incorporating kind of a lead maintenance worker position that wouldn't add a position, but it would actually elevate one of the people who we already have. So we would eliminate one of the park maintenance 2 positions and create a lead park maintenance position. There's more to come on that. We're not proposing that at this time. We still need to do some work on that, draw up what a real job description is, look at what kind of pay disparity there should be. Have some talks internally with employees here, figure out a process on how they could go about applying for it, things like that. But I think it would benefit them. I certainly think it would benefit Luke to have somebody to kind of take more control over things. Obviously, there are some levels of challenges with that when you have at least 2 of your 3 employees who've been here for 20 plus years, and all of a sudden one kind of gets moved into a quasi supervisory role can be challenging as well. But given the makeup of our staff, given Luke's leadership and the culture that they've cultivated there, I actually feel pretty good about it. Luke is happy to, would love to, if you have anything you want to add on that.
Yeah, no, I think that was a good summary of it. I think looking at having done this for a few years now and seeing the challenges of having a entirely even keeled democratic process on the park side, we definitely benefit from someone being empowered to take on the responsibility and the negatives that come with that too, of having to like make the decisions in a time when I'm not always available to be hands-on or be on site. having someone that knows that they've been, everyone knows that they've been given permission to like, okay, we're at a loggerheads here, we're gonna do this, and I can answer for that, Right now, there are challenges with everyone kind of being on the same, kind of place, and so, I think it would be super helpful with for our efficiency and would help communicate goals and, standards to the whole group. So I think ultimately there would be some, as Eric said, there'd be some challenges with the current group, and I think they would be able to handle it. But for the long term, and just looking at the hierarchy and the makeup of the park staff, assuming anonymous people in those positions, it would make a lot of sense and be really good for the overall efficiency of the department and just being able to like move forward with projects without having to constantly wait for the director to like show up, make a decision, move things forward. So that's kind of where we're at on that. But happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Well, and I also think, just speaking from a management perspective, it gives Luke a clear path to delegate off some of the things that currently take his time, of which he has none of. So it is, and without having to play politics about it, like, okay, who do I delegate this to, without somebody else feeling like, oh, well, why did you ask me to do that? And it would be a process, and we would develop a competitive process, assuming that more than one person was interested in taking on this role. But again, we want to develop a very clear job description for it, propose a pay schedule strictly for that position, and then go from there. So that will add a little bit more as we kind of go through this. But this is something we've been talking about for more than just the last few weeks. I mean, we've really been talking about this probably for the last year or so, and I think now is a good time to really look at this and say, okay, it was always a challenging endeavor to say, we're gonna eliminate this director position, we're gonna just throw that on the other director position, who just being rec director is enough.
Right.
That said, Luke's done a tremendous job at balancing everything out too, so keep that in mind.
And didn't we vote on being able to adjust these every, so for those who are on step EE, for example, we can still increase those salaries, right?
Sure.
So-
Well, you would basically create a new pay schedule.
Right, so,
Right.
but we can, okay, so
Right.
I just wanted to make sure that there was an avenue for us to do that.
Yeah, there always is. But you're either going to take, a rising tide raises all ships, and the entire pay schedule moves at a set percentage. Keeping in mind, whenever we do that, we base that on the lowest step, and then each step is 5% above the step before it. So you kind of get compounded that way as it goes. Anytime you take a percentage is larger of a larger number.
Right.
So it kind of moves the whole thing along in that way. And then to your point, if you're saying, well, maybe we make step EE 8% instead of 5%, sure, the board can absolutely do that.
Right, okay. I wanted to clarify that. Thank
Yep,
you.
absolutely.
Any other questions? I would like to acknowledge Luke and all your hard work in collecting all this information and providing it to Eric to provide to us, and Eric, you too. It's a lot of research, obviously, so thank you for your time, because it's spread thin as is, as we found out.
Yeah, I have to admit, Luke didn't just give it to me and then I created a report. We worked very collaboratively on this, and I very much appreciate Luke for kind of sitting down and listening to my line of thinking. We ran all sorts of different scenarios, down to 0.5% increments, and just saying, if it's this, what does that mean? If it's that, what does it mean? If it's, from 3 to 4 to 4.5 to 5 to 5, whatever those might be, and looking at it, we ran through all of those different models. And I think that we were both, I don't want to speak for Luke, but I think we're comfortable on what we're proposing at this point in time. And again, if, some reason we get some influx of revenue or massive decreases in expenditure. But I do, again, in my role, I also have to reiterate that this is just half of the equation. And we've got a whole other set of employees that are going to be going through, kind of a formal negotiation process as well. So we'll see how all of that then fits in, and I'm hoping we can get that done. All of this done by the time we're close to adopting the budget.
Cool.
We'll really know where we stand.
All right. Thank you.
And nothing else by the end of the fiscal year.
Perfect. All right, with no further questions, item 3, district manager.
Well, are we, what I'm looking for though is, just kind of a broad consensus of the board. Are these percentages seem reasonable? Do they seem, in either direction?
I'm good
I
with
mean,
it. I mean, I think you guys are right on target.
I mean, based on the data, that, you know, assuming that it's accurate, which I believe it is, then I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think they're astronomical. I mean, you look at a 6% sounds like a lot, but when you look at 6% of what is a relatively low pay scale, it doesn't move the needle
Well,
that
I think you, sorry.
No, go
I
ahead.
think you made it a good point that you're looking at it as a position, not as the staff now. So should anything happen, it puts us in a position that we're closer to being as others
almost
than
competitive.
way out in
Right.
left field.
Well, I think too, the total number, when you include all of the different parts that make up what a salary really is, seems very doable given our financial status right now.
Well, and I also want to acknowledge the board, because I do think that, at least, especially over the past 2 years now, the board has done a good job at really looking at this, creating that policy, and trying to bring these more in line, at least closer to market average. I think we all recognize that, given our size, given our finite financial resources, we're never going to compete with some of these bigger cities. We can't. We just can't. Even though programmatically or work product wise, I feel like we exceed a lot of those agencies, so, but you also have to be able to maintain fiscal sustainability too, so.
And you're doing it possibly.
I mean, if we were in a different financial position, we might have a different perspective, but
Sure.
based on what I know,
Today.
it seems, yeah, I mean, it all seems very reasonable and fair.
Then with that, what I will do is, as I start to build out budgets, I will incorporate these amounts into them. And that way, that's what you'll start seeing in the draft budgets, and make further looks at it as we move along, or just stay the course and.
I think you should prepare that anyway.
What do you
Prepare for it.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Prepare for the increase.
No, that's what I'm trying to do.
That's
He's gonna
budget.
put-
But I also want to follow, because we did take the time, and I appreciated the board, and I know that Lisa and Savon worked with me behind the scenes and kind of creating a procedure and a template for this, so this is the first year we really get to kind of follow that and see how much that makes sense. Because you can always amend a policy if we feel it needs to be amended as we go through this process fully for the first time as well. But right now, I just want to follow along with what the policy and procedures are within there, and I think we're doing that.
Great.
Okay.
Awesome. All right, now,
Yes.
number 3.
Okay, just take these in order, for the creek bank slide repair, I won't read this word for word, just kind of the big things. Needless to say, that we've got a lot of rain lately, so that's done 2 things. That, one has, there's been a lot of days where the crew simply can't be out there working, especially given what they're doing and where they're doing it. But the other thing it's done is shown that the work that they have done to date has been done incredibly well, because it is holding strong. The biggest part of this whole thing was really rebuilding that creek bank and the rock slope vegetation. I came out on February 4th, which was at the height of the storm, and before all the real big winds came out. That water was as high as it was, and I looked at a picture from January of last year versus a picture I took in the exact same spot, and the water was just as high. So coming up, probably 3/4, 80% of the way up the Rock Creek bank, went back down and looked at it when the water receded a little bit, and that is holding steady.
And the rock bank was still there.
Perfect. You would never even be able to tell. The retaining wall is like I said last meeting, is already in. They've been doing a very good job at monitoring weather and completely tarping everything on the upper level anytime they're expecting weather and they know they can't come into work, and then they also come by and check it, make sure that the tarps are holding into place. So avoiding getting that area especially saturated. They've completed all the waterproofing work. To the best of my knowledge, the pit is dry. Luke left. But we haven't had that water incursion problem that we've had. There's also been a lot of subterranean drainage that's been put in, that's been connected with drainage, taking it right out to the creek. So, like I said, there's days they can't work, but as mentioned in previous reports, they worked really hard to get that primary work done before the rains came in, and it is 100% paid off.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which is great. As far as our FEMA claim goes, that's actually been relatively quiet for the past month. We've kind of turned everything in, and the rep I've been working with has bumped it up the ladder to where now it goes on to the next level of the 87 different reviews that happen in a FEMA process. So I haven't gotten a lot of feedback at all on that, other than the emergency work, which is different. That's the work we did, within the first several weeks of this happening, has continued to progress, and it looks like that's been approved, but we're talking about a few $1,000s there versus $700,000 for the actual project. I did put in here, interestingly enough, and catching me completely by surprise, I tell you guys every time that it's gonna be several months before we really have any level of funding obligation, let alone receiving funding. This was rang home incredibly true to me a week or two ago when somebody from Cal OES reached out to me looking to close out a claim that we had from 2017.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's just the Cal OES side. Again, FEMA is 75%, and then Cal OES is 75% of the remaining 25%. So if you can do that math really quickly in your head. This was a much smaller claim. I expect, hopefully, and I completely kind of written it off and forgotten all about it. And it's funny because one of the emails and some of the documents they sent me was an email that I had sent them in 2019 saying, yeah, everything's done, let's close out, and I'm like, yeah, I actually asked you guys to do this 5 years ago, and now we're 7 years back. So, long story short.
So what I hear you saying is we might get our money in 5 to 7 years?
In total, yes.
Alright.
I would think that once FEMA obligates the project, that's the big one that we want right now. We want them to obligate the funding. They've agreed with the amounts and everything else, but it hasn't been fully obligated yet. Once it's obligated and we submit everything for work done, that initial 75% should turn around relatively quickly. When I say that relatively, I mean, could be 6 months or something along those lines. Once they obligate it, and then the remaining amount that would come from the state might be a little while longer.
I'm wondering if possibly we could ask our beloved representative, Jared Huffman, if he could speed things along.
If he's a miracle worker, sure.
You should send that email.
Especially these last several years, having so many declared disasters between the fires and the floods and the landslides and everything else, they're just overwhelmed. I wouldn't, let's just say I'm not gonna be the guy with the blue face on that request, Bill, I ain't holding my breath. Alright, it just might take a while. Fortunately, we're in a financial position where we can't operate this in arrears. This has always been a reimbursement program. I think, kind of the balance sheet statements and the P&L statements are showing that we're still doing okay, even though we're expending a lot of this money that hopefully at some point we will be reimbursed for. Speaking of reimbursement, I did have a closeout virtual meeting with our grant representative on the playground. We are waiting on one final thing. They are creating, as required, we have to create a sign that needs to then be put in, picture, and then the rep actually has to come by and see that we actually did all of this stuff, even though I've sent them pictures and everything. I anticipate at the latest by the end of fiscal year, we should have the $177,000 that we got in the grant for that. I did share the sign, just so everybody knows, with Chris, and again, thanks to staff, because I am not a graphic design person, but the signage does absolutely have logos for Kelly's Wishes Foundation on it. It has a logo for the Pamela Case Memorial Fund on it, so it acknowledges them as funding partners in this project. I think the sign will look nice. Fortunately, we already have a built-in place to put it because we removed a playground rules sign from the old playground and kept the permanent built-in stanchions. So We had the sign built to those exact specifications. So once we get it, it'll take 3 minutes to install. And this is a high quality sign, so it should last well beyond the required 4 years that we need to have it up there. It does have a very obnoxiously large Prop 68 logo on it because that's part of the grant requirements, but that's okay.
May I ask you a question?
Yeah,
How long do we have to keep that sign up?
4 years,
Then we can change it?
if we wanted to.
Okay. And then, thank you for your
Oh,
donation.
absolutely, no, thank you. These guys have been great including us, that's really nice of you guys, we're happy to do it.
Yeah, well, it's, the whole project's come out wonderful. I mean, there's
Yeah,
still people,
I agree with
I
you.
pulled in around 6:30 tonight, it was dark, and I could swear I heard kids playing in the playground.
They were still getting in the cars at like 7, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was pitch black. And then the only other thing I had on here was I have started the conversations with the firefighters next door in terms of let's getting that project underway to converting the bunk room from just kind of this solid military style bunk room into 3 actual separate sleeping quarters. They do have somebody on staff who actually is a licensed contractor, and he's already had spent some time just putting together some digital sketches of potential layouts. So I think we're good there, and I actually had a local contractor come in and kind of look at the spot, showed him the design, and just kind of was asking him for a little bit of feedback. We've done work with these people in the past, so he was happy to oblige, and potentially is actually interested in going on this. Everything that we're looking at says we should be able to get this done ideally by the end of this year, once we get it started. The one thing is gonna be permitting. I'm not 100% sure on if we're gonna need to pull permits for this or not, just because we're creating enclosed spaces, sleeping quarters, things along those lines. Hopefully it can be a relatively quick and easy permit process, because it's completely non-structural, completely non-foundational. These are basically just dummy walls that we're gonna put up, but each will have a door, there'll be enclosed space, so we'll probably have to get some permitting pulled through the county for this, and if nothing else, it's better to pull the permits than not pull them and get bid for that later. So I will set up a meeting, once we have more of a set kind of design and layout. The only problem with that is once you do that, then I probably am gonna need to get an architect on board to really lay out sketch design on it in terms of dimensions of everything. All that said, once that part's done, even the contractor I talked to said we can probably get this thing done in 2 weeks, which makes little disruption to them
Right.
from the day you start tearing things apart. Their design actually incorporates the existing Murphy beds that are in there by just kind of separating those apart and building those into singular units, so they would actually allow for 3 beds in each sleeping quarter, so each firefighter can still have their own actual mattress bed set up that just folds right back up when they're done, and then a different one can come down, which I hadn't anticipated, but that
I've
was
never
something.
been in there, so I can't even.
It was something that was important to them. Most times, they're, people are sharing mattresses or whatever, and for them, at least, even though they're in a bunk room, they all still have their own designated bed that's theirs.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really
Makes
good.
sense.
I
Right.
like that.
Yeah, so did I actually thought, and the way that they made it fit in there, I was like, okay, that's a clever use of space,
Yeah,
and
right.
a clever use of existing resources. We just bought those mattresses a couple, 2-3 years ago too, so those are all new. And we still know and have contact with the people who originally built those things, so to bring them in and see how they can't break them down and reinforce them, I think would be a part of it. All that said, I still think we can get this done well under the 60,000 that we allocated and approved to do this.
That's my question.
Great.
That's awesome.
Can I ask who the local contractors that you engaged?
Yeah, it was the guys who are building the things back here. They do a lot. They have 4 different companies under their umbrella, and so they're the general on there. I said, hey, can I steal you for a second? And he went over and took a peek and said, oh yeah, this is, and they were actually doing something very similar at the fire department in Inverness.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah,
And that's westward?
yeah.
Okay.
They've been amazing to work with.
I know you said that,
I couldn't be more pleased. They're super communicative. Any requests, they're on it immediately. I mean, even when we had all those big windstorms, their porta potty blew over, and they were here within 30 minutes of me telling them that it blew over and had it back up and secured, and I mean, just every little thing. We haven't had a single change order through the life of this project. On a $700,000 project is remarkable in its own right. And they've really been accommodating to all of our requests, and I've really appreciated working with them.
That's super. Would the work that would go on in there, at least in your mind, does that require to take it out to a bid and that whole
It
process?
does not,
Okay.
and
I didn't think so.
that's one of the reasons why I set that as kind of a benchmark number, so that you know how bidding
Okay.
works. Anything under $60,000, we can direct deal.
Okay.
Anything between 60 and 200, you have to go through what is an informal bidding process. Anything that you anticipate to be over 200, I'm just giving you round numbers,
Sure.
has to go through a sealed
Right.
bid process like we have done for some of these other projects. That said, I would still put everything together, I would still put together an RFP, I'd utilize people that we know at the Marine Builders to get it out there. I would still want to have more than one
Competition, yeah,
person
for sure.
come in and look at it. The one thing I like about these guys is even just looking at it, I mean, they're kind of the same type that we worked with on there. They really come in with a lot of value added, or hey, here's another idea, or so, you know, so that's the advantage of kind of going through other and looking at other contractors, but this wouldn't be a bidding thing, this would be a request, you know.
We could make the choice regardless of.
It would be a request for a bid based on here's what we're doing, you know, set up a little site visit day or individual site visits just to look at the site. It's a pretty simple project. So this, I would anticipate this to probably be more smaller contractors than the types who would typically bid on
Right.
large public work projects. But again, this particular company has several different companies under their umbrella that
Okay.
work, you know, from general contracting to contracting like this type of work to everything, and about, you know, the HVAC to all of it. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. And then the only other thing I was saying, I already mentioned earlier, we've already started on the 24-25 budget process too, so that'll be obviously something that we get more done quite a bit over these several months right up to adoption. Any questions on any of this? Okay.
Thank you. All right, fire department matters. Do you wanna take it? There wasn't too,
Well, just look at it, first we're on the minutes of the meeting.
Yeah, I'm just disappointed that we're over 6 minutes.
I'll ask about that. I don't know what the circumstances were. Although I will say they had some calls where they provided mutual aid that was pretty far out.
I did mention that in our meeting.
Right.
I was actually told that there's bigger problems in the world than 6 minutes. I'm just kidding. 6 minutes
I don't
is
think
still
that's
good.
what you were told. I think we said to go from 5 minutes and 58 seconds to 6 minutes and 6 seconds isn't that big of a drastic shift.
I'm
Okay,
just,
that might what you said, that's not what I heard.
There's a difference.
If Kathleen, if you want to recap the meeting and all, that'd be great.
Let's see, I'm not good at this. What did we talk about? I think the biggest thing to recap about is that, the fire commission, they're looking for ways to better engage with us. Is that a good way to describe it?
I think we're trying to identify kind of some strategic initiatives that they can work on. Because the fire side of the business is a lot different than the park and rec side of the business. I mean, you have a very regimented, you know, kind of paramilitary type of a system, so getting the fire commission engaged in certain things is a little trickier. We certainly talked about, one of the things we talked about was forming, and we'll form a working group to kind of look at what some of these ideas are, and that'll consist of less than a quorum of commissioners, myself, Chief Roman, and ideally firefighters who happen to be on duty, days that we need to pull in the captain and look at things that, what can the commission be doing that could benefit the community, the department, the district, the department, as well as the individual firefighters. You know, we talked a lot about recruitment things along those lines, and, you know, looking at, even brought up the notion of re-exploring the ball program, things along those lines, which I think are all good things to get the commission involved in, so.
I think putting on a 4th of July pancake would be an ideal way to bring in the community.
Well, then we would have to get the volunteer program back going again, because, well, that's the only way it's gonna happen.
I feel like Bill was at this meeting because those are the two things that I brought up. And then as you guys can see, Chief Roman's report is a little bit different than Chief White's. So the one thing he did ask is if there anything that we want feedback on or anything added that was on the other report.
Which is a good segue right into the next item.
Right.
Which is what?
Which
The
is
actual
the
fire chief
fire-
report.
Oh, you want me to read it?
No,
No.
no, we were doing the minutes, which is one item,
Oh, yeah.
and then the chief report is a separate item.
Nice, thank you. So if there's anything
Well,
that,
it's not as wordy, let's put it that way, it's succinct and to the point.
he is very, yes, to the point.
And I guess what I like, if he were here, he would probably be expanding on these pieces, so I would think that would be, that's probably the only thing missing is him being here, which I understand he can't be here all the time, but, you know, just like, I'm all for shorter and to the point, and then you fill in the blanks while you're here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can speak to a couple of them. The one that I can definitely speak to are these first two bullet points under the operations division update. I actually got a tour of the currently being built new fire dispatch center that is going in right down here at 1600 because they're breaking off from sheriff and doing their own thing. It's amazing. And Chief Weber is just such an incredible visionary fire chief who's for county fire, and what they're doing there, they're gonna basically rechange the whole model, and they're gonna go away from 12-hour shifts and go into 24-hour shifts and actually follow the same 2x4 schedule. So these are meaning two full days on, 4 days off, and they think that's gonna greatly help them in recruiting. Just like everything, everywhere, especially in the fire industry, recruiting and getting people in these jobs has been incredibly difficult. They put out a recruitment recently, kind of the same time as another agency was doing for 12-hour, and they got 30-something applicants, the other agency had like 4. So they think that this is gonna help. They've built in sleeping quarters, living quarters, kitchen, all of this stuff. It's a great repurpose of what is kind of a large institutionalized building over there. Every time I walk through the hallways, I'm looking for that kid on a red tricycle. It's a little creepy walking through there. But so that is going good. And then as far as Mira goes, and then I will keep you updated because keeping in mind, and Chief Roman and I are actually meeting about this later this week, because Santa Fe is responsible for providing for Marinwood dispatch. That's part of our shared services agreement. This dispatch model isn't cheap by any stretch of the word, and Santa Fe was still kind of, it is coming up on their agenda for them before, they will be the final agency to climb on board. Every other fire agency has already approved their agreement on a contract for service with the county. On the 22nd, it will be on the agenda for Santa Fe City Council, so I have already voiced my opinion towards this, and I strongly urge. Right. Because A, you have no other option, and B, you're responsible for us. So hopefully that goes according to plan. And then as far as the new Mira system goes, they are anticipating activation of this new system and rollover to happen in October 2024, which actually makes this other thing a little tricky because they have to open a new setup on an old system that's currently in use, and then be ready within months to transition to a brand new communication system, with the Mira system, the next gen. But they're hoping and look like they're on schedule to do that finally by the end of October 2024, and a final system acceptance by the end of the next fiscal year, meaning they'll go through, work out any kinks and bugs with the vendors involved, and then hopefully by 6/30 of 2025, they finalize their punch list, and that contract is officially complete after many years and several delays. So those are kind of the big ones that definitely will impact us.
Any questions?
You don't.
Yeah, the only other thing of interest here, tomorrow, Luke and I are meeting with the veg management specialist from Centerville to look at potential projects for next fiscal year. We definitely have our eye on a couple that we really want to do, with the big one being hopefully to use core funding, which is the much larger pot allocated to the entire kind of what they call the Centerville zone, to resurface Queenstone Fire Road. That's gonna be the big one I'm gonna be making a pitch for. It's over the last several years and these big storms, it's gotten in pretty bad shape.
Resurface?
Well, they'll regrade
Regrade
it.
it.
They'll fill in the cuts that have started to occur throughout the road.
Started?
Regrade it, redo the swales so that way they can direct drainage where they want drainage to go. It's a pretty heavily used, vital cog for not just our agency, but all agencies. I mean, that connects to a vast network, and it's heavily used by the county, by county parks, so I'm assuming we should be able to use core funding for that, because it's going to impact multiple agencies. And then some of the other areas we're looking at is just kind of trying to continue with our shaded fuel break into some of the lower priority zones now, which is basically gonna go from like Peachstone down around Fall Las Colinas all the way up to Blackstone, and then back up Blackstone right towards Horn Trail. We're providing shaded fuel breaks back there, and then of course we'll still do the goats and things like that. So I think we have a pretty good vision on what we would like to see happen. We should have the funding for it.
Anything I can bring to the meeting Thursday?
No, not at this time. They are you're talking about for MWPA?
Mm-hmm.
They're just now starting on work plan development.
Okay.
So that usually it goes through a 3-step process where it starts with what's known as the Advisory Technical Committee, which Luke actually represents our agency on. Then it goes through the Ops Committee, which I represent our agency on, and then it goes to final approval by the board.
Right.
And that I don't think happens until, I think, your May meeting maybe.
I know Ann Krelock is the one that will be.
I will tell you what, Ann Krelock
Yeah.
is.
She's on it.
She is on it. She is an incredibly smart, dedicated individual who they're very fortunate. I think Mark Brown does a very good job from the executive officer standpoint for what essentially is a very hard thing to coordinate when you're looking at 17 different agencies that are involved, 17 different elected officials on the board, 17 different representatives on an ops committee, 17 different, but Ann is as sharp as they come, and she really knows her stuff. She has a tremendous background in knowing what all this is, and has done a really good job helping agencies kind of navigate through CEQA processes, through getting, kind of pre-approved vendors set up. She's brilliant, and just an incredibly smart and an incredibly nice person who's really easy to work with. So
Great.
they've done a great job getting people involved there. That I've been nothing but impressed with how they've stood that thing up. And they are absolutely a model that every other county jurisdiction, everything across the state is looking at. One of the big things they're pushing on right now and are making actually some headway into is the whole kind of insurance concern. And the IBHS, things like that, they are absolutely a voice and absolutely being looked at, and they're looking at how to integrate our home hardening and defensible space inspections right into those broader systems. The problem is, in an insurance world, you can't really regionalize that, so it's kind of got to be something that gets adopted at a statewide level, but I'd rather be where they're at pushing the envelope than waiting for somebody else to do something.
Right. That's great.
It's been a good agency. I think they're in their 4th or 5th year on a 10-year
We're
thing.
going in the 5th.
Going into the 5th year, that's right, yeah, I guess that makes sense, because it kind of stood up in 2020. So it'll be interesting as that starts to get closer to the 10-year mark. Hopefully they'll put that back on, because I think it's been a good investment for every taxpayer.
other questions? Perfect. Park and rec matters.
Well, we had I thought it was a really interesting meeting
Ooh,
this
do
last
tell.
time. Well, it was interesting from the standpoint of it was longer than our meetings have been.
I was gonna say, I noticed the adjourn time.
Yes. And there weren't a lot of decisions made, it was just a lot of discussion about primarily pickleball. And just taking a peek, and I know Luke's gonna talk about that. Come on, old man, you'll be out there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go on record and say you are not in my dreams. I don't wanna steal Luke's thunder, because I think he's gonna talk about that. But it was a really, I thought it was a good conversation. And Luke and his staff really had put some thoughtful things together for the P&R Commission to look at in terms of a survey that is gonna happen. And then the P&R leadership remained the same, right? Michael stayed on his chair and Ian wasn't there, so he's vice chair. Right? So what happens, certain meetings you don't want to miss. And then I know it's also in Luke's report today, but the Lucas Valley Estates entrance has gotten some attention, which you probably see more than the rest of us. And I was gonna say I'm seeing a smile there, so there we go.
All right. Any questions?
I don't know that he's got it in his report.
I have a note. I thought I saw it. There was a note in there.
Well,
I'm happy to go deeper. I just feel bad when I say stuff, and then Luke's like, "Well, thanks, man." That's
No, the only update I would give, and I don't even take this from Luke, is we have finalized the survey. We've got it up and input it into SurveyMonkey. I think we're just trying to do a couple last little test runs and make some tweaks to make sure questions are moving the way we want them to move.
Like a pickleball survey?
Yes, the
Okay.
community interest survey.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that, because it was interesting, because there was, some people on the commission are like, well, there are courts, let's just do it. And, I kind of chimed in about, it doesn't really work, and then John Campbell has a lot of experience doing things. He's like, sometimes the process is more important than the project itself, and you have to go through the process. You have to do the public input. You have to listen to people. You might make different decisions based on what you think some people are wanting, but the process is equally, if not more important than the project itself. So, I thought that rang home, and I thought everybody really heard him say that. He lends a lot of credibility when that comes from him, because this is what he does, and he's done some massive projects, some smaller projects, and everything in between.
Well, and I hate to bring this up now, this is kind of like when CrossFit was starting, how the medical, when they were talking about injuries and everything. They've been in the news in the last couple of days about pickleball injuries. It's amazing how this is happening.
I would also like to point out, this is exactly how the P&R meeting lasted 2 hours.
Right. I would say the one thing that came out that was unanimous, just so as people start to discuss this, it's an important note, I think, is the fact that if something were to happen with pickleball, that I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, but basically everybody on P&R, even from the get-go, was like, we're not doing anything on the front tennis courts. Just because I think that could be something that, if it's like, if the public doesn't clearly understand that, it could,
The tennis community would definitely.
yeah, I mean, I think it could influence people's survey responses and things like that.
Right.
So, but
We
the
tried
questions were
to
very clear.
fix
Yeah.
some of that language in the
Yeah.
survey, just to make it very clear that we're, using language like, only the lower courts adjacent to the middle
Right,
school,
right.
and,
You mean
Are
the
those
ones that the
lighted?
Miller,
No,
that the school
Yeah.
is
Cool.
owns?
Yeah,
Okay.
Because
Well, we own the courts, they own the courts.
having pickleball on lighted courts would really disrupt the drinking on Friday nights.
It might encourage them.
We did talk about the lighting courts, and the
On
fact
that
that
topic.
keeping people from playing late in the evening, because it is loud and everything else, so, yeah, anyway, more to come on that.
Yeah,
Yeah, let's avoid the drinking in the park topic. Thanks, Bill. Any questions about the minutes either? All right. Well, hopefully Chris didn't steal all your thunder.
No, he didn't steal all my thunder. No, I just want to reiterate, it was a great meeting. I really enjoyed the discussion, and I thought it was really productive and very beneficial from the staff perspective of getting a lot of different perspectives on a very contentious and complicated topic. So I'm encouraged by that meeting that we're going to be taking the right steps, whatever the outcome is moving forward. I feel like we've got good people putting their best foot forward for that. So I really enjoyed that meeting. I thought it was very beneficial. So I'm excited for the process. For the Park and Rec matters for this last month, I feel like I sound like Chris tonight. I'm gonna try to clear my throat here. So
Get it.
there's a couple notes I'll make. We do have the spring-summer issue of the Marinwood Review completed. It's up on our website in digital form, and we're really excited about that. And the physical published copy will be being mailed out in the next, I think 2 weeks at the latest, but probably sometime within the next 2 weeks. And that has all the information about our spring and summer programs, classes, events, the pool info, as well as some other community information. We're trying to transform the catalog into more of a community resource, not just a rec catalog. And so we've got some wildfire prevention info in there from the fire department. We've got some community information, like community spotlight on a few people. And we're hoping to add more and more of that. We updated the trail map. There's been a lot of new trails and different things since the last time that was done, I think, which was maybe 2014. And so we're excited. So the new version of the trail map is in the catalog. So that
Are there bench?
are
there bench icons?
It's not quite as zoomed in. I mean, if you really zoom in, maybe you can see them. You know.
But Charlie, I got a great shot of the bench today. You're gonna want to put it in the next.
Oh yeah, send it my way. So yeah, so that's we're really excited for that. It's a great looking. I think it's our best one yet. Big thanks to Carolyn, who's she didn't really ever sign up for being a graphic designer, catalog creator, but she's done a great job at it, and it's better than it's ever looked. So we're excited for that to come out. And our spring and summer registration dates are established, and they're put out there. It's going to be March 12th and 14th for residents and non-residents respectively. And we've had a ton of phone calls and emails, and people seeing the catalog and been inquiring. So we're expecting a really busy registration week coming up, and we're prepping for that, making sure all the links work, making sure all the information is correct and getting out there. And I think everything's on schedule for that. So that should be great. Kind of a new event that we haven't done before, I wanted to just bring to your attention is we have a big trail running event taking place in parts of Marinwood the weekend of February 24th and 25th. I was approached by a trail running organization called Daybreak Racing, who puts on big trail running events all over the country, and they've worked in other areas of Marin County for several years. And one of the partners of this organization actually lives in Marinwood now and has been running the trails for the last couple of years. And like, oh, I've got a great setting here to do a trail run in this area, and they saw the park as potentially a possible good place to do the staging for that. So they approached me, and I thought it sounded cool. There's a lot of other agencies involved. The trails, it's a 50K on the Saturday, and then a 28K run on the Sunday. So it involves much more than Marinwood, but Queenstone, Fire Road, and parts of Horn Trail are included in the run. And then there's a lot of other areas, Pawnee and areas, county trail areas. Big Rock, yeah.
Is that awesome? Who's the gentleman?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Who is the gentleman?
I have to get you, I know the person I've been in touch with, his name is Jeremy Long. The person that lives in Marinwood, I think his name is Dylan. I could get you the info.
He's my next door neighbor.
Okay, that makes sense, yeah. So he's the
Dylan.
other.
Oh.
Who's like a
Jamie's house.
okay.
Jamie's house.
Widely known trail running
Yeah,
champion.
he's an endurance runner.
Yeah.
How many
For
people
girls.
are you expecting?
Sounds like there's around 250 people signed up for this. And it's like they're a big organization that run these big events. So we're excited to let them use our space for this. They've rented out, the park to do the staging, and then we had them do some permits for utilizing the open space. And I partnered, I talked to the county open space district because they've dealt with this same organization for several other trail runs in many, many years past, going back probably more than a decade. Work with them and just getting an idea of, what kind of access they allow and the permits and the fees and things. So we kind of aligned with the county on how to approach it. And they've been great to work with, and everyone I've talked to said they've had great experiences with them. And so it's a cool thing to be able to expose more people to the great trails we have in our area. And a lot of Marinwood residents I've found out are actually signed up for this, and they're getting a chance to go run the trails. So the Marinwood portion of the run is actually very small, but they are going to start and end in Marinwood Park is where they're going to have that. So it should be a lot of fun, and I'm excited to see how it goes. And so just wanted to we'll be putting up some signage at the trail heads that are in the impacted areas in the park in this next week, just so people have a heads up that there's going to be a lot of people running through there. And there'll be CHP out during at the places where they'll be crossing streets and stuff. I don't know if we'll have one in Marinwood. Probably there'll be people kind of trickling across the crosswalk at Queenstone throughout the day, but it'll be kind of as they finish, they'll be coming down. But
do you put anything out in the community regarding parking or anything like that?
They will be putting signs up about the event, so I imagine there will be a lot of cars. It'll be like a swim meet, kind of thing. So we'll be, which we don't advertise. So,
Not me anymore.
Yeah.
Not me either.
Yeah. But yeah, so
I like that you use
it's
that.
there's nothing going on in the community that at the community center that weekend, so we'll be able to utilize the parking lot and surrounding areas. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
That's
But I
exciting.
think they seem to have their ducks in a row. They bring in all the infrastructure for that, and should be good. So if you guys are around, it should be interesting to see how that goes. And they run rain or shine, so it'll be
It will be rain.
it could get exciting.
Down Queenstone in the rain.
And then beyond that, our next event's the Raise a Glass wine tasting on March 2nd. And I'm excited to announce we've moved to stemless wine glasses for that, so be excited for that. Otherwise, the event, we got 11 great wineries coming, good music, good food, it'll be another great event. And after that will be our spring art show. On the parks maintenance side of things, as Chris mentioned, we did do some updates to the landscaping around the entrance to the Lucas Valley Estates at Lucas Valley and Bridgegate intersection where there's the sign, which was overdue. There's a lot of overgrowth there, some dead brush, a lot of poison oak had infiltrated the area. So staff removed everything out of there and kind of started from scratch and put down some weed barrier and wood chips, put some drought tolerant plants in, added a couple boulders, and everything's looking really nice. We got a few more plants we've got planned, and we'll put in those in the next week or so. But it looks nice. It should be easy to maintain moving forward, and we're excited for that. And a lot of the Lucas Valley Estates residents have expressed their gratitude for that.
It looks amazing.
Yeah, it looks a lot better.
Yes.
We'll overdue,
Thank you.
but, you're welcome. The staff's been down at the pool getting things ready. The Water Devils start their season at the end of February, the last week of February, and so we're just getting things
Sure you don't want to sign up?
fixed up down there. We're getting a new shower, fixing up some of the benches and tables, and doing some other random things down there as we do every year. And that's coming along according to schedule, weather permitting. We have some, the woodwork around the community center. We've got all these beams that kind of stick out, kind of decorative, some of them structural. And we're having all that work looked at and sanded and restained in the areas that have shown wear and fading. And they're coming back out tomorrow. I think it's supposed to rain all day, so I don't know if they're actually going to get any work done tomorrow, but in the next couple of weeks we'll be getting a lot of that woodwork restained and some of the framing repainted, so that'll look really nice going into the pool season and for the spring. And We're also having all of our sidewalks and walking paths looked at this spring. We typically bring a company out to assess that every couple of years. We kind of got a little bit of a hiccup with COVID. It's been a little bit longer than we typically wait for that. So we'll have someone come out and assess all of our paths and sidewalks for tripping hazards and for damage and things we need to address. And they'll give us a report, and then we'll decide to move forward with kind of shaking down some of the things that have raised due to tree roots and fill some of the areas that have dropped with gopher activity and just damage for other reasons, and get all the sidewalks in working order. So that'll be coming down the pike in the next month or two, and yeah, amongst other things. But that's all I wanted to touch on, but please let me know if you guys have any specific questions about anything I talked about or anything else. Thank you.
I have a question. Who is responsible for the sidewalks that run along Miller Creek from, like, say, Las Colinas to Marinwood Avenue?
Those would, I believe, be any the ones that aren't in front of houses, the ones that are like
Behind the houses. You know, it's on
By the bus
the,
stop?
on the north side.
It's a wonderful question.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question.
As far as the sidewalks go, I know the county has gone out and done some level of work on some of those.
I know there's one part of the sidewalk that is probably a good 6 to 7 inches on a V.
Yeah, I know one spot.
And the whole sidewalk is leaf strewn. There's hardly any cement that you can walk on without walking on leaves. And if it's wet, people are gonna be slippy sliding all over the place.
Yeah, I know it doesn't fall under us. I've had a lot of conversations about things like sidewalks. Typically, the sidewalk is to the benefit of the adjacent homeowner. And that's the county's take, and there's actually kind of a lot of case law that states that it's the homeowner's responsibility for the sidewalks in front of your house.
In front of your house,
But on something like that, I don't know what I know that a couple years ago, the county took out a portion kind of near the bus stop on the western direction, just on this side of Marinwood Ave, and relayed, probably 4 squares.
No, all that's
right
left
there.
is that bench.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, so I don't know, I don't know.
I'm just curious
try to reach out and
because,
follow up.
you know, we walk it all the time and I just,
Be careful.
I try to follow up, I'll send them, hey, by the way, really great job trimming all those trees, but have you seen the sidewalks? See what they say.
Yeah, our purview for the sidewalk assessment we're having is the sidewalks in front of the Marinwood, the community center and the Marinwood Park, and then the other 2 parks, the
Right.
ones right in front of the mini park and the Loomis Valley or the Creekside Park, and then those walking paths in between, but not the sidewalks along Miller Creek beyond
well,
this
it
property.
was also brought up, you know, the walking paths. So from Opalstone, there's a path that comes all the way down
Peach.
into the park, straight through. And then when you cross Quietwood, it was brought to my attention that the people that clean the paths don't pick up the debris, they just push it against the fences. Now, when it rains, all that debris gets wet and sodden and starts degrading the fences. And pretty soon.
That's good to know. So that's our
Yeah.
landscape contractor that does those, and they in their contract, and we have to revisit this every so often. They are supposed to remove all of the trimmings and debris and the leaves themselves. They're not supposed to be blowing those or sweeping those against the fences. So
that was brought to my
that's good to know. I'll follow up with with our account manager with them, and it's one of those things that they do it for a while and then someone get reminded. So
Are you looking at those pathways as well?
those are part of the sidewalk
that's
situation.
what I-
Yeah,
that's what I
exactly.
figured.
So unfortunately.
I just care about the one from the Panhandle to Quietwood.
You mean where the benches are?
So that one. And maybe the most western one, eastest one on Quietwood. By the maintenance facility. Maybe direction it is.
It's actually one thing we're gonna be talking about at future P&R meetings. That came up, just wanted to know more information on from the maintenance of all the walking pathway in there.
I saw that in her question. She
So,
lives right on it.
From somebody who
so-
lives right next to one.
Correct,
Uh,
who maintains part of one.
Good.
So, perfect. Any other questions? Perfect. Any items of interest to add to future agenda?
Okay, just one quick note on a somewhat item of interest, and Luke actually brought it to my head here when he said that we've been getting a lot of phone calls. We haven't been getting any phone calls the last 2 days, at least, because the phones have been out. And that's not exclusive to us, because we actually had a resident come in yesterday saying, hey, you guys know anything about the landlines not working?
Oh,
And he
yeah,
lived-
aftercare at the school at Lucas Valley Elementary, their phone lines were down too, the aftercare.
It's a bigger issue. I've put in, I already put in a service, on Monday morning, which is when we found it, they were working Friday night. We came in Monday and there was no, yet oddly, the 2 lines that run into the fire station are working.
Oh, good.
Yet these ones aren't and the other ones aren't,
That's,
and other ones. So this is strictly related to old school, what's known as POTS, plain old telephone service lines, like the copper lines. This isn't like your internet phone or anything that runs through like Comcast or anything like that. This is strictly
Your rotary phone?
old school.
Yeah.
Well, the nice thing about having those lines is when all the power goes out, the
They
phones
work.
here still work. And that's one reason why I haven't walked away from them, because it hasn't been as big of an issue the last several years, but you know, when we had some of those multi-day PSPS events and then everything kind of went dead, these phones still worked here, which was great. But we did put in a service ticket later that day. I saw nothing short of 4 different AT&T bucket trucks just a little bit down the road here on Lucas Valley, right on the other side of Las Colinas, staring at a wire that had it just hanging straight down. I was like, okay, you know, and so it was 4 bucket trucks, another truck who was kind of like, yeah, a little to the left kind of guy. Hopefully they're doing something about it. I put in a follow-up. We supposedly have a direct rep because of the system that we're on with, it goes through the state, it's called the CalNet system. I haven't received anything back, but I just said, hey, can I get an update on A, what's going on, and B, when do you expect it to be fixed? So it's definitely more widespread, but just FYI, email is probably the best way to get through to us right now, because if you call, it'll just ring and ring and ring, and when we pick it up, it's just dead.
Cell phones,
Cell phones, yeah.
yeah, that worked, if we can maybe
Yep.
put that in with the whole cell phone coverage component.
oh, you have to bring that up.
I gotta do
So
it.
close.
Gotta do it.
All right, any other items? Nope. I motion to adjourn at 8:53.
I accept.